All right, welcome back to episode 5.
Wow, already.
We're starting to get there.
Yeah.
This is a series, obviously, you saw in the graphics, is Pointed Reflections. We're here with ordained minister, Pastor Kass, ordained minister of the Presbyterian Church. And today's title is Pulpits, Pews, and Politics. We're going to put that above on the graphics, and you can follow along. And without further ado,
Well,
Pastor Kass.
well, good morning, Benji. By the way, I want to introduce you to everybody. Benji is a fabulous, recent friend of mine who has motivated me to get into this series of podcasts. I never dreamt I would. So here we are. And we have been using articles in my book called Pointed Reflections, which is the title of the series. Now, today I want to talk about Pulpits, Pews, and Politics.
That's an interesting title.
Written in 1960.
Well, politics in the 60s.
Hasn't changed much.
No.
Well, which will it be, I wrote? Kennedy or Nixon? Well, we changed the names. Which will it be, Trump or Harris? It used to be Trump or Biden, but I changed it already to Harris. I don't know, it may change again before the end of the season. We wish you could say, but that is just not possible for us for a number of reasons. One, because I cannot predict it, and number two, because the church that I represent at the time I was in the pulpit, we did not have the authority or the permission to endorse anybody from the pulpit. That's for the reason is well known. The church is a tax-exempt institution.
Yes, well known.
Yeah, and therefore it has to be neutral when it comes to politics. So the issue is, what can the church say? Or does she have the right to say anything?
Well, that's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
Let me break off here for a moment, explain to you guys how to watch this show. We're talking to alienated people who used to go to church or want to go to church, and we've always focused on these alienated and concerned,
Yes.
former or never been churchgoers. So if that's you, you're really going to like these videos. It's called Pointed Reflection because, as Pastor Kass said, we're going to point at something and reflect on it. And Pastor Kass loves getting out on YouTube to all these millions of people. And then we're going to read and discuss an article, and we're going to leave you with a question. Just put it in the comments at the end, and we'll talk about your comment on the next show.
Okay.
So, without further ado, again, there's a lot of ado today. We'll give it to you for Pulpits, Pews, and Politics, written October 23rd, 1960.
Well, we have a series of questions. Which will it be was the first one. And when I wrote it, it was, is it going to be Kennedy or Nixon? Then the second question was, what can the church say? And third, does the church have a right to say anything? While every instrument of communication is being used to sway the minds and consciences of the people, must the church remain silent? Now, there are two traditions. In the South, where I had my college education, I went to a school in Greenville, South Carolina, called the Buckle of the Bible Belt. The tradition at the time was the church must stick to preaching the gospel, which means get people saved. And when they die, they go to heaven. And that was it. Don't get into politics. Well, I think the climate has changed today. Churches want to get into politics, but they don't know how to do it.
That is a fantastic way to say it.
Okay.
Without hurting any feelings.
No, we're not hurting feelings.
They really don't.
I've observed the scene for 50, 60 years. And there are those who care less, and there are those who care very much. It used to be the traditionalists, the conservatives, said, stick to the gospel, and the liberals, the social gospel adherents, used to say, no, speak to the problems of the day, racism, hunger, housing, whatever. and the two always clashed. So if you want to be a conservative in those days, you did not get into politics. They called this getting into politics. Well, what has changed today is conservatives very much are involved in the politics of the day, and I'm going to come to that in a minute. Now, technically, they stick to the fact that the name cannot be mentioned in the pulpit whom they support, but they come this close to saying where they stand, and if you're a person in the pew, you have no problem what the pastor is talking about when he preaches about the political implications of the gospel. Now, we could always talk about the political implications, but not the specifics of the candidates as to who we endorsed or not. Now, we do believe the church must speak if she would minister to the total person. See, that's a dilemma we have. We either speak to you and me, a total person, and I am part of the social fabric, which includes my place in society. I'm a member of a party. I vote. And I do want to vote, although I grew up in a church denomination that did not believe in voting. To this day, they will not vote, and I'll come to that in a minute, why they will not do it. So, then we come to how did Christ deal with this issue? You see, Christ was very aware that the land was occupied by the Roman government, and he was being pushed by his adherents, and some of them more than others, to declare his position as a savior of the nation. He felt very strongly about that. We read that when he was coming into Jerusalem, when the city came into view, he broke up into tears because he knew that soon the city was going to be destroyed. In 70 AD, Titus, under the Romans, came and totally destroyed and took everybody into exile. That's when Israel, or the land of the people of Israel, finally got emptied out. They all went into exile. Now, the question is, politicians today speak of concern for the needs of the country and humanity at large, but Christ's self-sacrifice on the cross for humanity is still unsurpassed demonstration of real and utterly genuine concern. In other words, Christ's approach was not to rise to a throne, but to die on the cross. Wow. What a shocking difference. If I were there, I would say, that's it, forget him. Who would want to follow somebody on a cross?
I think we often learn much too late what the actual story was, and that hasn't changed even today.
Okay.
But I really like this I love this sentence, the unsurpassed demonstration of real and utterly genuine concern. For not just then, but now.
Yeah.
You know, a millennium later.
That's true. And unsurpassed demonstration of real and genuine concern often will lead the subject to the cross, because forces are raised against it are too many. And in politics today, as positively as we speak about the needs of the people, there are those you propose A, and B arises to oppose it. If B proposes it, A arises to oppose it. And this is the dilemma of American politics. What are we going to do about it? Now, the church stands at a crossroads in America. By the church, I mean Christianity, Christian churches, not all. Not all are as involved, as I said. But there is a strong movement in America today to declare and work to elect leaders who will help Christianity declare to be the religion of the land. This is called Christian nationalism. Now, it's nothing new. It comes all the way from the Old Testament times, when politics and religion always lived together. And in the Old Testament times, they learned to live together in mutual support. So the political system, the king, and the religious system, the priesthood, as you know, in the Old Testament, there was the temple and there was a Levitical priesthood. And they were the top of the tier in terms of ruling the people. So they and the king worked together to maintain order. But the order was one that suppressed and oppressed the people. So this is the issue. If we are, as a church, as Christians, going to address the needs of the people, or are we going to seek political authenticity and power to become rulers again?
Well, if I had a simple piece of paper and I added up the amount of times that church and state work together well, I'd probably have a lot of space left for the result, a positive result.
Yeah.
I don't think that's ever worked.
Well, one says it's because the church has never had the authority and the power to be what it wants to be. Give us that power. Or the other says because the church always interferes, get them out of the way so we can do our work. That's a secular versus the religious approach.
Okay.
Let me give you a little story, a real story from our experience. My wife Samir and I were vacationing in Williamsburg, Virginia. And you know what Williamsburg is. It is the old city of colonial times.
Okay.
And at that time, it's a historic city, and we were visiting it for that reason. Well, we came across a scene. The old courthouse was having a mock trial, a case, and they wanted volunteers. And my wife, as usual, volunteered me. And what was the case about? Virginia at the time was under the control, the religious scene of the Anglican Church. It was a state church, official church of the state of Virginia. And everybody had to pay taxes to the church, their tithe.
Okay.
Now a group arose that said, wait a minute, we're not Anglicans, we're Presbyterians. We don't want to pay tax because we have our own church. And then they said, okay, but you have to then pay twice, once to your church and once to the Anglican Church. You have to pay. So there was a trial. And this is of the history books. And I joined the plaintiffs, and I was seated among those who petitioned the government to allow the Presbyterians to meet on their own without having to pay taxes to the Anglican Church. This was the issue being argued that day in court.
Wow.
And the court bailiff took the list of our names. Fifth, he says, there's not one gentleman among them. He was making fun of the Presbyterians. See, we're not Anglicans. But the way it went, we won the case. The Presbyterians won the issue.
He who laughs last,
well, historically,
laughs best.
This is what happened. What I'm getting at is there was an experiment of state religion in Virginia. It didn't work with the Anglicans. There was a state religion in the Bay Colonies under the Puritans. And for a while, they were in control. And anybody did not agree had to flee. They could not stay because they'd be eliminated. And that was Puritan. It did not work. But we today are trying to revive that model for the whole country. So we have the Christian nationalists who go back to the Old Testament and pick up from there the model, which was a theocracy.
Okay.
It did not work even for them. You go and study their history. I have. It did not work. And a protest movement grew up among the Old Testament people. The protest movement was known as the prophets. The prophets arose, Isaiah and Jeremiah and others, who arose to oppose the rule and the power of the kings and the priests, and the people were suffering, to free the shackles of the people. So we are moving into that direction. The new movement in America today, which is called dominionism or dominion theology, is what's providing the theological basis or the theological arguments for the state. And that was started by somebody I knew personally. His name was Dr. Rosas Rushtuni.
Okay.
And he died in 2001. He started a movement that has been picked up today by Christian nationalists who are trying to revive Christian nationalism on a theocratic basis.
Which didn't work.
It didn't work, but they're trying very hard. And our guess is, and you can guess that I don't like that, if the Republican Party were to take control, these people are going to try very hard to use them as a vehicle to reintroduce Christian nationalism. Specific local issues are such as support by the government of private Christian schools, financially, you see. So the issues are very real for the people.
Well, I actually have a friend, and she was a preschool director, and I can tell you the amount of money, the percentage of the money that comes from a fully functioning school, so on a compound for a church, it's quite an impressive number, somewhere around 1.3 million a year.
Yeah.
And I'm noticing more and more as we talk, and I spend more time in the church and stuff. These schools are funding a lot of things.
Is that 3 million government money?
No. That's private.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And the private school movement gained head of steam after the Civil Rights Act, when the South had to desegregate its public schools. And when that happened, they refused to attend desegregated schools, so started their own in churches. They started these church-related private schools so that they could remain white in the South. So that's the history.
Wow.
Okay?
It's definitely not the case today.
No, not the case today.
But it's interesting to know that we've come, it seems like we've evolved on that point.
We have. Now, the other side of the scale, the purely social-minded churches who believe if you change society, you're going to change people, humanity, they're wrong too, because you cannot change something from the top down. We discovered that, for example, in Chicago, they had all these public housing, beautiful buildings built. What happened? They turned into slums, and they had to destroy them after a while because the people in it were not changed. So I come to the task of the church is far deeper than mere social reform. See, this is the opposite of Christian nationalism.
Okay.
It is Christian socialism.
Okay.
And that can be just as dangerous. It remains for her to resolve the deep need and anguish of humanity at the foot of the cross. The cross must still be preached. And the task of the church is not to remove slum buildings, but so to change the lives of people that they will not turn their homes into slums.
Okay, let's do that again.
The task of the church
is not to remove the slum buildings, but so to change the lives of the people that they will not turn their homes into slums.
Yeah.
Whew. There's a lot of, I'm ex-Army combat medic, overseas service. When I hear stuff like that, that's the America I grew up with.
Yeah.
And I haven't felt that type of pride in a long time until you just read that.
Okay.
It's been a while. Because a lot of times people go, USA. It doesn't go as long or as loud as it used to.
That's right.
I love this.
Instead of forever talking about peace, she demonstrates it in the lives of Christ-centered disciples. A proud humanity presents lofty and high-sounding programs that somehow always fail.
It really ties into what you were saying earlier.
And the church presents a crucified and risen Lord, whose gospel has done more for mankind than we can ever imagine. That is my witness, and I've observed that to be true.
For the last sentence of the second and third paragraphs here, the unsurpassed demonstration of real and utterly genuine concern to done more for mankind than we can ever imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of things that we have to, as you know, a new Christian, there's a lot of things that I have to accept.
Yes.
That I have no concept on how much I'm loved.
Exactly.
And I'm trying to feel it, and it's coming along slowly, but like these other people who are alienated and concerned, you know, I'm in the same boat.
Yes.
Stuff like this really kind of lets me know that instead of thinking I know how much God loves me, let's just understand that we'll never understand how much God loves me.
Yes.
And me, meaning you, me, you, me.
And we have to, representing the churches, we have to be a both and, not either or kind of program people. I think the liberals have their point, and the conservatives have their point. I am at heart a conservative. That's my background. I came that way. If I did not, I would not be here today.
Correct.
But I've observed how conservatives have more and more become intolerant people. In the name of freedom, they cried freedom a few years ago because they wanted the freedom to be whatever they want to be. What are they doing? They are imposing intolerance upon others. And there are issues today that we could mention as examples. Takes what's happening in our libraries, for example.
Yes.
Conservatives are removing traditional classic books that have been loved because some self-appointed censor goes and says, I don't want this book. Well, who gave you the right on behalf of the public to do that? So conservatives, in the name of freedom, are removing the freedom of others.
Now, I've heard about this.
See? So
on a national scale, too.
Yeah. So on a national scale, I challenged a speaker once who sat next to me in a dinner who was going to speak on this subject of Christian, that America is to become a Christian nation again. I said, what are you going to do with the dissenters? There are today millions of people who don't go to church. They don't care to be called Christians. The secular. There are millions who are Muslim. There are millions who are Jewish. There are millions who are Buddhist. What are you going to do as Christian nation? You're going to say, as long as you take a second-rate position, you'll be allowed, tolerated to be here? That's what they do in dictatorships. And we love America. When America came and established this land, it was a land for everybody. This is why there is this principle of the separation of church and state. I love it. Jefferson knew what he's talking about when he talked about the wall of separation. Conservatives are trying to remove it. When you remove it, you end up with intolerance. Okay?
That's a danger word.
And America, when they say, it's a godless nation, wait a minute. It has nothing to do with God. It has to do with the people. How are the people going to live as equals? So it can be only if religion is relegated to their separate position among their own adherents, and the land is going to be there for everybody on an equal basis.
But that's not where we live, especially in Southern California. It's all about differentiating yourself from everybody else.
Well,
any way you can, wearing certain clothes, saying certain words, buzz terms of the day, whatever trendy topics are out there, and this is why it's the opposite of what needs to happen.
Okay, but then those are the trendies. Look for other trendies, and they form their own group, right? So nothing new there. So we're shifting, but still seeking social connections with those who are like us. Okay, do that. The country's free. We allow you to do that. but you're not free to impose your will upon those who do not want to do
Correct.
the same thing.
And that's where the line needs to be drawn.
Exactly.
Is life, liberty, and
Yeah.
the pursuit of happiness for
Yeah.
you, not for
Yeah.
somebody else.
So when it comes to the pews and the pulpit, we're there to help people celebrate their freedom that they get in Christ. Jesus said, if you follow my words, you shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. The freedom, we believe in freedom, but freedom that comes from accepting our place in humility as part of a larger fabric of humanity where we are not everybody. We cannot rule everybody.
Of course. What would be the question this week?
The question then is, will you seek to discover a faith that gives you the freedom to be yourself without having to impose your belief system upon others who do not go along with you?
Wow.
Okay? That's a
That's
question.
like college thesis level.
Okay.
That's fantastic. I'm glad we got that on film.
Okay, so that's what Christ does for us.
Okay.
Okay?
What I do like is that you want to seek formulas that work.
Yes.
If you start with a broken formula,
Yeah.
where are you going to go with it? Yes, you might be able to repair some things, but a broken formula is a broken formula. And, of course, we haven't found the right political formula.
Well,
Do you think we ever will?
no, but we must learn to accept those who follow a different political formula. If we elect leaders who are going to crack down on dissent, America is finished. America was born in maintaining the freedom, allowing those with dissent, and yet accepting a mutual form of government that will allow those who dissent to sit in the same room together. That's the genius of American politics. We're trying to get rid of it. And when we do, that's the end of America. That's how serious I think
and
it
it'll
is.
become something completely different.
Of course, it'll be another tyrannical, in the name of God or whatever, took the Holy Roman Empire, Charlemagne or whoever, they all tried to introduce Christianity by force. It didn't work. And there are other religions who tried. Islam has been trying to do that by force. They've been trying to make Armenians Muslims for 2,000 years. It hasn't happened yet. So, religion has a tendency to say, because we have the true God, the God we believe in is the true God, and our belief system is the only authentic system, then all must conform to that system. See, that's a big jump. When that happens, tyranny takes in.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully America will right herself.
Well,
Hopefully we can get a victory in November for America, no matter who that is.
so
A victory for America is a victory for America, and I don't want to see
Yeah.
it fall into tyranny.
So I'm back to question, which will it be, Kennedy or Nixon?
We end how we begin, right?
And you know how Nixon ended, and you know how Kennedy ended.
Wow.
Isn't that something?
That's a double whammy.
Ooh,
Oh,
wow.
Okay, well,
Yeah, all right.
let's try not to repeat ourselves, shall we? We'll see you next time for next week.
Yes, sir. Thank you again.
It's
Have
always a pleasure.
Have a good week.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.